Ready to go?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not ready to go.
I was about to count down.
Sorry, I'm so fucking sorry.
Your bottom just fell out there, didn't it? You just shit yourself.
Yeah, I know.
This is some of the content we should be keeping in, I think, just to make it sound endearing, you know? 3, 2, 1. So yet another milestone, Lewis.
Yeah.
First episode recorded in person. This has taken us literally 2 hours, way longer than it should have to try and sort this out.
Yeah, this has actually been a lot more complicated than we thought it was going to be in the first place. Lighting is a really important issue for podcasts in person. We figured this out, but
yeah, and we also, you've forgotten a bunch of your equipment down in Bristol,
true, that's true.
We're kind of running on fumes at the moment. But if you guys didn't know, this is Guide to the 21st Century, a topical podcast between Lewis and I, where we come together and try and navigate the minefield that is life in the 21st century.
Yep, each week we'll be going away and we think about a little topic that's been playing in our minds, and then we bring it to the podcast format. And what we typically do is we disseminate this, start bringing up these topics, and hopefully we try and reach some type of conclusion about how this issue is affecting us and people around us.
Yep, so if you guys have any thoughts or opinions or evidence, or if you just think we're plain wrong, please leave a comment in the YouTube video after the episode. We'll hopefully get back to you, maybe discuss it in a future topic.
Yeah, that's really what we're looking for. And also, I'd just like to note this is the first in-person podcast, which is a huge milestone. We've wanted to do this for a long time, and also the channels went through this period of immense growth in the last video, which
can't even be explained. We don't know.
No,
we don't know how.
No, yeah. I'd certainly not family members. But yeah, so this is a big moment. I'm quite looking forward to this episode, first one in person. Hopefully in the future we'll be able to bring these back to you every once in a while. This is obviously related to things like lockdown and COVID. So going forward, this week I'm going to be talking about the alt-right.
Okay.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted to approach this topic because I kind of discussed to you the other day. I feel like when I'm talking about, because like both of us, I can only speak for myself, but I'm not super politically minded. So when it comes to talking about politics, it's really easy to talk about the right, the left, the alt-right and the extreme left. You know, like these are like the four categories which end up getting bounced around and more. That's where most of the talk is going on. And I feel that in the podcast I've done thus far, in each episode, I've kind of been I've been talking a lot about the left, I think, and compared to the right. And I want to kind of bring back this topic of talking about the alt-right and who they are, because really it's one of those things where it's almost like a given these days. It's like everyone knows that the alt-right are, you know, Nazis, racist, homophobic, transphobic.
Yeah,
these things are like obvious.
There was a big turning point in the past where all of a sudden that became like really bad. You know, after World War II, you know, it was like that led to a world war, and then they were kind of defeated. But I think what we do a good job of on this podcast is, you know, the extreme left and the alt-right and the right and the left get a lot of traction. They get a lot of like attention in social media. But I think we've been doing a good job of highlighting what the reasonable centre does as well. You know, we make a lot, well, I do in particular, I make a lot of comments regarding the reasonable centre, which I think is just your average Joe who has like opinions on matters and isn't extreme in either regard. And it's just your everyday person that hears about these things, and they don't get a lot of attention on social media.
That is exactly the point. The observation that I've made, I think, is that it's that when it comes to talking to most people are pretty, you know, like their views are very moderate. It's just like it is these particular extremist groups that end up getting most of the traction, and they end up generating most of the topics we end up talking about. It's because like because most people don't bring up to your attention the social issues that the extreme of either polar end end up bringing to your attention. So for instance, like most people don't really think about nationalism and think about white superiority, but it's this particular alt-right group, where this is like the topping point. And the same way the left, that they talk about things like, you know, small aggressions in life and culture appropriation, and like these are things that don't often get discussed by the people in the middle. So it's great for us.
Yeah, I think the thing about the podcast is we're trying to navigate these issues that are becoming, you know, bigger talking points in the 21st century. You know, we're talking about the backlash that LGBTQ people receive. We're talking about the corporate pandering to Black Lives Matter. The issues that we have to navigate are about the extremes. You know, these are the people that are causing the issues, if you know what I mean. So the extreme left and the alt-right are the ones that kind of cause the issues. The reasonable centre are what it is on the tin. You know, they're reasonable.
Right, exactly.
You don't have to navigate and tiptoe around them. The ones that cause the issues are the extremists who like don't agree with you and cause the conflict. So you can see how these would naturally lead to the topics that we talk about.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So a lot of our content does set around it, and that was the very reason why I wanted to just kind of touch base and just have a discussion purely about what we think about the alt-right, because I think it's that the problem I have is that it's unsaid, you know, and it's so obvious, but we should discuss it, even if it is just going to be. It's because I've done a little bit of research, just because as much as everyone has a good concept of what the alt-right is, you know.
Well, you say that, but maybe they don't, because
Okay.
you know now that you've said that, you're right. People do throw around the term alt-right, and I think maybe one of the problems is that line is becoming a bit. People don't know what it is anymore.
Right.
So they start calling people alt-right who actually are just conservative.
Right. Yeah. Well, that kind of is. I say people have a good idea. They probably don't have a good idea, but they probably have a pretty firm idea. Like people have associations they associate with the alt-right, you know, and like it's fascinating. It's because like this whole concept of alt-right is quite. From what I understand, it's been around quite a while. It's not an old conservative movement. It's very, very fringe. But basically, in 2015, it's when it just blew up. You know, all because of the Trump election. I think that's like the core of where this movement came from. Is because it turns out that like Trump's advisor for his campaign owned the newspaper Breitbart. And I don't know if you know of them, but they're effectively the right HuffPost.
I've heard of Breitbart. I think I knew that they were politically aligned to the right, but
Yeah.
I don't know much about them.
They're not just right, they're like alt-right. You know, like that.
Really?
Oh
Okay.
yeah, that's like they're the extreme end of like this complete bias media. So like Trump from day one knew, I'm pretty sure he knew the audience that he was wanting to tune into. You know, because he literally hired this guy that had this audience that already existed, and it's a fascinating one because it's one of those movements that's just blown up in like recent years, and one of the so I guess kind of what I would like for us to try and do is like trying to define what we think alt-right is, and then kind of define. I guess I want to have an idea of where this is going and why it's picked up. There's a couple obvious ones which are all very. I think a lot of it has to do with technology in the 20th century. So
21st.
21st. Yeah, God's sake, what a slip up. So the very first thing is, I think it would be worth mentioning that, like, and this is exactly right what you said, the definition for alt-right is really hazy. You know, there's not like when you look it up, like there's a statement where you look it up. It is described as an ultra-conservative, populist, nationalist movement. So that's quite a few words in there that define it. So basically, ultra-conservative, very, very right-leaning, which I'll get to in a second because I'm not convinced they actually are that right-leaning for some things. Populist, so basically wanting to like appease disenfranchised masses. That's what populist is. I think populist is very similar to Trump was a populist leader because his angle is that he wants to tell people that like politics has left you and it's forgotten about you behind, and I'm here to shake things up a bit more radical. I think that's basically what populism is in politics. So it's the mass. You're not trying to deal with people that are making normal decisions here. It's the people that are a bit more radical. And nationalist, which is what we just talked about last week, which is quite interesting because we in last week's episode we came to the talked about the descriptors of what like a patriot versus nationalist is, and basically a nationalist is someone that holds the values of their country that they live in
the highest regard.
In the highest regard. So they have like a large degree of devotion and love for their country, but not just that, they think that their country is inherently superior to the other countries. And this is where you end up getting, I think this is where the first tendrils of like white nationalism comes in, because like places like America and Britain, well, America not so much, but Britain, you know, like there's a tradition of whiteness there, you know, and so when you get these people that see their country changing in front of them, and you see like dilution of white, you know, and like more and more cultures and ethnicities joining, and these people like they're unable to dissociate that with, and they basically view that as the thing that's ruining their country right now. So there's a huge thing in Britain, and it's a huge thing in America, and it's one of the obvious, I think one of the more immediately obvious aspects of alt-right is the racism, right? It seems that way to me, is that you'll see them on the news and they're usually relatively like young men, and they're, if you actually read their website, it claims that they're more or less all like educated young men straight out of uni, but like other people, when they actually do statistics, they claim that they're mostly uneducated men, actually, that are more closer, that are close to like 30s and 40s. So it's, and like you tend to find that there are like central ideologies that cling these people together. So there's not, as much as that's like the statement for what the mantra is, you know, like their populist national group, what you tend to find is it's just like a bunch of people that like are anti-woke. That's like the people that are not super alt-right. You've got the people that just like hate modern feminism. They're kind of also alt-right as well. You've got people that didn't like things like Gamergate. They're alt-right. You've also got like anti-transphobic people. You've got like Ku Klux Klan people. You've got a huge amount of people that are now kind of on this one category of being alt-right, which I think is probably a problem already, is that the definition is really poor here.
Yeah, I think from what the groups that you just started bundling together there, we talk about anti-feminism, anti-woke, Gamergate, Ku Klux Klan.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't. My definition of alt-right wouldn't have all of those groups in its bracket,
Right.
if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I've never really looked up what alt-right is, but in my mind, alt-right was maybe an extremely right-leaning group that sort of used that foundation, that platform, to push like ideologies that like racism,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like fascism, stuff like that. So it kind of taken it to the extreme, but then you used that as a platform for like a different sort of motive, if you know what I mean.
I think
That
so.
that was kind of what I thought it was. I don't, when you talk about people like Gamergate seems to be about anti sort of like wokeness in games, like that having like an influence in video games,
Right.
and that doesn't necessarily seem to be like a right-leaning movement to me.
Exactly. This is what when I started reading a little bit into some of the things that the alt-right claim to think, it wasn't immediately obvious to me that this is a right-leaning political group. You know, for instance, like the Gamergate thing, I don't think that's super right, but like there's also there's lots of like socialism in the alt-right, you know, and like anti-government, and like, because it's like so much of like the alt-right is like distrust of the establishment, and that's inherently left-leaning. You know, just the whole concept of breaking down what's currently there, not trusting the whole concept of kind of the anti-establishment movement doesn't scream right to me, and they want like smaller governments, you know, which is not a super right thing. And it's kind of like the anti-capitalist thing is very strange. And what I was kind of led to, what I've kind of led myself to believe is that alt-right, it's almost as if like there's a bunch of people that wanted to have a political party, you know, and there's like the right in America and there's the left. And then you also have like the kind of more extreme left, which is like Bernie Sanders' lot, you know, which is like, you know, they want like universal health care, and that's like kind of that's the non-mainstream left. And the right, there's a bunch of people that kind of, they're clearly not left, they knew that, but they didn't like the establishment. So they needed something else to grasp onto, and this is where like the alt-right is just sprung up. I think it's people that kind of have like general views, but it's just that those views are intensified more. It's like, it's not just that. So basically now we've got this like parity where we've got left, right, and like the strong left and the strong right, right, and so it's, and when it comes to these groups, to me it doesn't feel like their political views are really strongly coalesced. Like I don't think it is political reasons. It's just people acting to the extremes in both cases. Right. So.
Right. Well, I thought when you said like socialists are almost like considered like alt-right now.
Yeah. Well.
I thought socialism was like the most extreme left.
Well, that it is. Yeah. But
so
but
I thought that socialism was like basically the build-up of like government and stuff like that, and you know, as from what I was aware, the left were more inclined to believe in government and big governments, and the right were more inclined to say we don't want to give them as much power as they have, sort of anti-establishment.
Yeah, the right is more free markety, and the government and the left is more government having control, from what I understand. So I guess what actually, if I could reiterate, the point I was basically trying to make was that the views of the alt-right are very like fractious. So like they have these ideas of like not trusting the government, but they also don't trust capitalism because they think, like, for instance, like tech companies have too much power, which both the extreme right and left do believe. So like there's like a strange convolution of these views, from what I seem to understand, it to me didn't present themselves as a particularly strong basis of political thought. I'm not an expert, you know, but like
it definitely seems like there are a bunch of ideologies now that have banded under, or have sort of been put under the umbrella of alt-right. You know, when we talk about like racism, we talk about sexism, homophobia. These are all like different areas, and you know,
sure,
there
and they
are
exist for
obviously
different reasons.
there are people that like overlap and have these opinions for like all three, but like it seems like they've all been branded under like alt-right. I'm not particularly sure that this is a conservative or like right-leaning group anymore.
No,
right?
no, it's not. Yeah, I think it's just it's for me, what the conclusion I think I've kind of jumped to basically is that it's not to do with the politics so much. It's just to do with dissatisfaction with what they see around them. Like
Okay.
so it seems like, and that's why it went hand in hand with Trump. It's because like that's what Trump's hope. That's what he sold. He was like, you know, I'm not one of your other politicians. You know, He didn't particularly say what he's gonna do. He
No.
just said that I am a change from the regular, and to me that makes it. It almost like looking back, it makes so much sense why this group picked up, right?
I mean, for Trump to say something like I'm a change from the regular, that seems like the platform that could have got the reasonable centre to vote for him. You know, because we talk about like Trump having supporters from the alt-right, but the alt-right in America, there isn't 80 million people in
exactly,
America
yeah.
that are
He
the
won-
alt-right.
He won the vote, right?
Exactly. So the platform, like Trump's obviously, he ran under a banner of he wasn't really going to do anything about the hate, which is why the alt-right did vote for him.
Right, exactly.
But he also ran under a banner of I'm not the same as these guys. I'm change.
Right.
I'm different. And that's what got your average person to like turn around and vote for him.
Well, I mean,
Which he in the end, he wasn't different, was he? Really? I mean, I think in the end it was pretty much more of the same.
it did seem that way. Yeah, like apart like it almost seemed more insidious with Trump in the end. It's because they just like his buffoonery clouded the nefarious political actions that ended up going on and will always go on in government. But like it's one of those things. It's like you and I. I'm not American. We didn't vote or anything like that. But like I liked Trump before Trump was in power. I was like, I liked the idea, but I was like, fuck it, you know, get him in power.
Well, I don't think you liked Trump. I think you liked the idea of something different happening.
You're right. I like the idea of shake up and that is appealing to a lot of people.
I was the same, and I was actually under the opinion that Trump was going to win that election
Right.
on that platform.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, and everyone around me was like,
I wasn't convinced.
Yeah, everyone was like, you know, he's not going to win. He won't win the next one. He won't win the primary. He won't win the actual election.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, there's a lot of people out there that just are tired and would have voted for him for that reason.
Well, that's another thing as well. Is because you and I are obviously kind of aware of this, and but when it came to the Trump campaign, like every single year when you're like using social media, you know the election's happening. It's because all of a sudden all your posts get fucking flooded with bullshit about political candidates and stuff like that. Even for America, I find that anyway, because I use Reddit and I think Reddit's quite American centric. But there has to be something said for the use of social media in Trump's campaign. Like I've never seen memes so effectively used to win people over. I don't know if this is something you witnessed in your use, but like there were several subreddits, and like shit, you know, man, they flooded the front page, and it was just like people basically voting Trump, and like they called themselves nimble navigators because the idea was that, like they had this concept in their head that Trump was like outplaying the rest of the politicians, like he had like 140 IQ type of thing, and like he was a level above, and it became like a huge meme. And I just remember pages upon pages of people like blindly. It was like people cheering like a football game. They weren't talking about the politics or what he was going to do.
No.
It was just like Trump, you know, build the wall higher. Fucking didn't think he was going to build a wall, but it was just like fucking you build that wall, Trump.
I don't know. I think the alt-right.
You're right.
The alt-right probably did think he was going to build that wall.
That is the thing, which is looking back, we now realise that like a lot of people looked at that, and I thought it was a joke at the time. You know, I just thought it was just like people just being absolutely ridiculous. But there was a movement behind
Build the wall.
behind this, you know, and like I think as well, like I think the alt-right themselves, like the actual nefarious part of this movement, I think they were I think they were behind a lot of the memes as well. I think this was
Probably.
like
Yeah.
this is as I said, it's a relatively young, new-ish group. Like think of Pepe the Frog. It's considered it's considered a hate symbol now, and that's basically the symbol of the alt-right. When it used to be a meme that was posted on 4chan for years and years and years and years and years. You know, like the way these things have popped up is
These memes were, I think these memes and the sort of social media presence also heavily influenced the whole fake news sort of movement. So I think there was probably a lot of like real news out there that you could look at and you could think, oh, Trump is a bad guy.
Sure.
You know, there were a lot of legitimate news stories and journalism that could have been done to really defame him and to really like sort of showcase him for like the idiot that he was. The problem is that there was also that the left were taking every available opportunity to do that,
Right.
and some of the times that they were doing it,
wasn't
it was
true.
fake news.
Yeah.
You know, when every so often when something came out and it was like, oh, that actually didn't happen, or this story hasn't been fact checked, or something like that, all of a sudden you lose all your credibility.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
then there was this massive social media movement, which Trump was a huge part of. You know, his Twitter profile was a huge part of it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know, him saying, you know, this is all fake news, because it's so easy for him to then go, well, they lied about this, so how can you trust him with any of this? And he's pointing towards the stuff that's like actually true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, like, fake news is legitimately become like a part of our lives now. You know, it's just like it's just a common term that's like, and that you don't even think about. But like, I think it might have been like Trump that made that term big. You know, like it was him.
Oh, of course.
Like but like it's almost like a good thing in a way. It's because Trump, I think he used it exactly the way you said it. Like he used it to basically like deplatform, no, not deplatform, but like to make the people that are accusing him to sound like idiots, because he was like, and everything they said now, once that time he lied, like everything's fake news, and they ended up like effectively weaponizing disbelief. But just like as an aside, like what Trump ended up doing by claiming that all the news again about him was fake is actually by spreading a huge amount of awareness of what fake news actually is, I think.
Sure. I mean, yes. But before that, I wouldn't say that fake news was a particularly big issue. And he turned it into something that was absolutely massive. And he also basically used it to cover up all of his flaws as well, you know?
Right.
Because, you know, after a couple of years of this, when like several news stories had been debunked and things had been fact-checked, and I remember seeing like one specific example where I realised fake news was a thing. Was there was a video of American border security shooting like tear gas into Mexicans, and so the video had the caption, you know, how can this happen? How can Trump be allowing this to happen?
Yeah.
And it turned out it was a video from the Obama administration.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And it was like, you know, this is what he's talking about. Like, you're using like somebody who's like an activist on the left has literally seen that video and thought, oh, how can this be happening?
Started getting the keyboard warrior going.
Started rattling the keyboard, saying, how can you be supporting Trump under this sort of stuff? And it's like, well, that actually happened 5 years ago, and that was Barack Obama.
Yeah.
and
Whoopsie.
Yeah. Whoopsies. And then after that, it's like, well, if they say this, like this guy that's posted this is no longer credible. Nothing he says can be trusted anymore, because we know he doesn't fact check, and if he has fact checked, we know he's willing to lie about this.
Yeah, it's an incredible one how that became like. That's why I kind of feel like the whole like alt-right movement and Trump, it was kind of like it did disrupt the flow of politics, because politics was relatively stuffy, and now like we'll just become so much more aware of like the manipulation of platforms, I think. And I don't know, like I don't know what the average age of like an alt-right person is, but I just kind of feel it's younger. You know, that's the impression I'm always given. You know, Really? You don't know?
I would think it would be 40-something white man.
Really?
Yeah, I would have thought so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're probably drawing a distinction between like you're thinking of probably like the old-fashioned racists in America, but I'm probably thinking of like the younger like incels, and that's probably those are two groups that I think, you know how like we were talking about how there's a big catch term for what like alt-right is. I think those two firmly go in it. Right. I'm pretty sure like old school American racism, like fucking where's my country gone type of thing.
Yeah,
I think that's
give me that gun.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's pretty all right, because like you can understand how that's conservative as well. The conservatism is much more. I imagine like rural South America. But, anyway,
Yeah, we're talking about you, Texas.
yeah. Literally just you. No, of course not. But I suppose what I'm thinking about is like when I'm thinking of a younger crowd, I'm thinking of this like. I'm thinking of what an incel is, and I think most people know what an incel is, but for those unaware, I think how I describe it is basically it's like imagine like a big sweaty neckbeard woman hating a violent aggressive man baby,
Right.
and so like I basically I guess what I was going to say there was that I feel that like incels have become this movement basically where a bunch of young men have become totally and utterly disillusioned with society, and they've just like lost all grip on social needs. So it's these people that just stay in their house all day and just like live in their trash, and they've just been forgotten and put to the side, and it ends up harbouring huge amounts of resentment and hate, which ends up manifesting in these extremist groups.
Where do you think this comes from, though?
Well, that is exactly it, and that's the interesting part, is because I think it is one of those things where many people in societies do feel disillusioned, and it's kind of like what we're talking about with like the people that are worried about immigrants the other day. It's like people feel the world's getting worse. You know, I don't know whether it is or not. I don't know whether it's just like access to information is making people more aware than they've ever been before, but people seem to think the world's getting fucking worse and worse every year. You know, the same shit happens. We keep hearing of global warming or the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. And people feel that, I think a lot of people feel they don't have a voice. And I think that leads to these people that just shut off society altogether. It's like, most people, like, see when you leave your house in the morning, most people fucking like, I'm not saying everyone will like do their fucking face full of makeup and stuff like that, but most people will care. You know, you'll like have a shower and you'll look after yourself, and when you're talking to someone, you won't be ostensibly mean to them because you live in this world, and it's just a reciprocal thing. You know, like we live together and we all want it to be better, whether you realise it or not. My observation with like incels is that this has just been like completely and utterly, it's gone. It's like this social aspect to life, it's just been thrown to the side, and you result in these people that live lives that are predominantly through message boards, you know, and they are quite aggressive and they can't form relationships and they fall out with their parents.
Okay, so you think these people that they feel sort of disillusioned with life, they feel a disconnect, they feel like they don't matter, and then do you think these groups then find each other, like, you know, they find each other on message boards, they find each other online, and then they become like a bigger force, a bigger group?
Well, that's the thing, like the alt-right is today a predominantly online movement. There's like there are meetups, but they're very rare. They don't happen often, but I'm not saying there's 80 million of them, or I'm not saying they won the vote, but there's a number of them, an appreciable number of them, that's more than we see represented in protests in real life.
You think there's more than what you think there is?
I think so.
How many people do you think in America, for example, are alt-right?
Oh, geez.
What percentage of people do you think they represent?
I honestly couldn't give you a good representation of it, because like if you could give me a value for what like the more extremist groups that are like left leaning, I would probably say it's equivalent to that. I would say that the number of alt-right and the number of is there a name for like extreme left?
I think that's what we're calling them.
Okay, well, I think I imagine those numbers are comparable.
I think so, but I think it's probably about less than 5%.
I was going to say like 1%.
Yeah,
but that's my complete view, you know.
But that's like no people though.
But they have a fucking voice. That's the thing. They have a big voice, and like I agree that I think like a lot of the reason that Trump came in is because like it kind of swayed centrist views, but part of that was the alt-right movement in itself pushing these views to the public. Like they ended up being a mechanism for Trump to end up winning it, because they were his like dedicated hardcore fan base, the alt-right. I'm sure that, and he knew that no matter what he said, they'd be voting for him. But
I think there's also a big portion of America, because the election is Democrat conservative. So there's also there would have been a large portion of the voting populace that just wouldn't vote Democrat.
Right.
So there's probably a bunch of people in America whose vote just can't be swayed, and they'll vote for whatever candidate their party puts in front of them.
Well, there's that as well. Yeah, in America, there's a huge bunch of arguments because it's like, that I kind of agree with you there, but like people. In America, it does seem that if you're a conservative, you're a Trump supporter. It does seem that there's almost been like a coalition of forces doubling down. From what I've kind of seen, because like I don't know, it's almost as if like people are defending Trump because he's conservative. Because it's like, because I'm a conservative.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a doubling down of Trump's great. Yeah, fucking love him.
Well, they probably have to, because he got nominated and elected at every possible stage.
Yeah.
He beat literally everyone. So they, if people are going to turn around and say, we can't support him because he's a conservative, it's like, well, your constituents also voted for him to be your president.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
it's really hard for people to admit they're wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that must have had a huge part of the continued support for Trump, because after like 2 years of his presidency, it became quite obvious to most of the world that Trump was an idiot and a racist and like all the things under the sun. He's just like a despicable. I think he's quite a despicable human. I don't know him, but it's like obviously, but you know what to fucking say. But I think he's not. I think he's really not a nice guy. But there's still this like adamant fan base for him that want him in power again, and I don't know. I feel that so much of this. It's now I was talking about incels, and I feel like they've become disillusioned with society. I think that's where it ties in with Trump as well, because it's like it was just a representation of change. So it's just a huge number of people grasping towards this representation of change, and now they're kind of like. So now you've got all these people that were just wanting change, but were kind of maybe centrist before, and now they're looking like absolute idiots. And you've got this core of the alt-right who actually are these horrible people, and it's meshing in a horrible way, which I think is probably conflating the numbers of what people think alt-right is as well. It's because you have these people that voted for Trump, and Trump is so bad now that it's like, how could you not have been alt-right to vote Trump? Right?
I think, for the election, for Trump's election, I think it can't be understated the importance of the people that voted for him that were just doing it because they wanted to see change.
No, I think that's
I don't think it would be unreasonable to suggest that half of the people that voted for him might have did that just because they were tired. Now, if we talk about the alt-right and the effect they had on the election, I think in terms of their voting power, it's basically negligible. If we think that they're like 1% of the population, then that's going to do like nothing in terms of the election. But the presence that they have on social media and the voice that they seem to have is having an influence.
That's
so in terms of actual ballots, not much to worry about. But in terms of the stuff that they're spreading, you've got a little bit of concern there because everyone's seeing that.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really interesting is that this group, I think it really similarly mirrors the extreme left, and it's so we talk about this often.
Horseshoe politics, man.
Exactly, man. We talk about how similar both of these sides are in so many ways, but like they just don't seem to see it. And I was watching a bunch of videos about what is an alt-right, and it's like these people refuse to see change. They're unwilling to accept differences. They're uncompromising in their views, and it's like you're just describing a stubborn, extreme person.
I'm telling you, man. They're the same.
That is the same as the left. Like both of you. I don't know where your views have come from or why they're so solidified, but that's basically the main conclusion that I've realised is that this has nothing to do with politics. This is just like radical people, really radical, that have more right-leaning tendencies than the radical people in the left-leaning tendencies. And it was just staggering how similar they were, even though their nefariousness from like the left is so different. It's like I find it really fascinating about how both of these groups are problematic, but how they're so unlike each other, but like each other at the same time.
Well, they're exactly the same in almost every way. The alt-right and the sort of extreme right, they don't see any they're kind of racist, they're homophobic. They think it's more physical differences that they won't tolerate, whereas the alt-left or the extreme left, they won't tolerate difference of thought.
Right.
They're quite happy for you to look and do and be whoever you want, as long as you think exactly the same as what I think.
Yeah, yeah.
And because of they have those differences. That's the only difference. But even that is enough for them to say, we cannot compromise with you. Like, look at them, they're so far on the other side of the spectrum, and when in reality it's like a big horseshoe, and they're kind of like pointing at each other across the small gap.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
And they're
yeah.
like, oh, look at them, they're so bad, and they're going, look at them, they're so bad. When in reality, everybody else is just looking at them thinking,
you guys are idiots.
You're exactly the same thing.
Yeah. I think another thing that it stems from is like this whole, I think the left versus right paradigm of like being for the whole or being for the individual. And I think that's one of the things where we do see an expression of difference between the extremes on each side. It's because like the left, it is all about, you know, sacrificing the needs of the few in order to make a happier general society, and whether that means through government intervention or new legislation or new laws, the idea is that this will affect all of us. Where the right, it seems more like, keep the government out of my affairs, I want to be doing my own thing, I don't care if it offends you or makes you feel this way, like I'm going to do it because I'm a free person. And that's there's probably a name for how these two what these two extremes are, but that's probably one of the main spectrums that I do see deviations to the right and left. But it's absolutely staggering, you know, and like it's a group that's so interesting because they've just came out of nowhere, and the problem is as well that they don't seem, it's not likely they're going to leave now. They're quite established. You know, they've only been here for 5 years. But
especially in America, where the president refused to denounce them. That
was bad. Yeah,
I think that was the big thing, where all of a sudden, I think these people have always existed.
That they have, yeah.
They just weren't in the street before.
Right,
they were on message boards. They were in their house. They were moaning at family dinners, you know, about these immigrants and about these blacks and about these gays. Whereas Trump kind of came on the scene, and they were like, this platform. They were like, oh, this guy's the same, and you know, they were going out and doing these things, and he wasn't like denouncing them. You know, there's like you see those like news articles where it's like Trump that's denouncing these left protests, denouncing like Black Lives Matter protests, and then when they storm the Capitol, he's like, well, we can't point fingers.
Yeah, I know I came to the exact same realization myself. It's because I kind of like. Oh, part of me was almost like for a while I was like, good for him, he's like sticking up for his troops type of thing. But then I realised that like Trump is hopelessly aware that these select people, they are his fans, they are his voters, they're the ones that support for him, and not only like they're the ones that will keep supporting him after the presidency. You know, these are like feverish extremists we're talking about here, and they are extreme in their actions and in their views. So the fact that he isn't denouncing them, I think, is like atrocious, truly atrocious. It's because the views are so obviously wrong, but at the same time it's so obviously a ploy for him to keep interest with this particular group of people for as long as he can.
He can't denounce them because, you know,
that is his people,
because those are the votes that he's getting.
Exactly.
He's going to lose popularity, or you know, maybe they won't turn up at the next election or something like that.
Yeah, which it almost implies that like Trump must have thought that he had a chance of being voted into power a second time. It's because
I think Trump fully believed he would be elected to a second time.
Yeah.
He's so arrogant that he must have thought that.
I guess he probably did think that. Yeah, but you have to assume that like the people in the Conservative Party would have been somewhat aware that like this is never going to happen for a long time. We fucked it, you know. Next 12 years it's going to be blue.
I don't know, because a lot of them were still kind of backing him, though. They weren't voting for him in terms of like impeachment and stuff like that. You know, maybe they thought there was a chance that he'd win, and if they sort of stepped out of line, that would be them finished.
I think that is the result of like the polarization that we see now, where people aren't allowed to have nuanced views. It's like, for instance, and we're talking about politics, you're either with the party or you're against the party. And if you're with us
in America, yeah,
and I think it's 100% worse in America, yeah. And it's one of those things where it's like, if you're with us, then we can't say anything bad about you. If you're not with us, we're going to slate you. I don't know, like, just for having a view that's not ours. So it seems like one of those things where people have very much they had to back Trump up. I'm sure so many of these people that are going on the news and like saying our president says this and he's saying this and this is his view, they thought to themselves, or like fucking cringing to themselves, you know, like thinking, I cannot believe he said this, but at the end of the day, I'm the Conservative Party, you know, I'm a senator or whatever. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and there's not really any conclusions to draw. It's just going to have a bit of a discussion about these people and where they've come from and why they've stuck around, and I think it all comes down to this disillusionment and the opportunity that Trump saw. It seems like such a perfect storm looking back. I don't know if Trump wasn't a thing, if alt-right would be a word people would use now. That movement probably could have kept bubbling in the background, being... I don't know.
I think it's always been a movement, and it's always been a thing people have understood, but up until Trump's sort of candidacy, up until the point where he ran to be president, I think they were kind of disregarded.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, they would have just been bubbling. They would have been there, I'm sure, because racists will always be racist, and they're like stupid national people will always feel this way. But the platform wouldn't exist. Maybe we also have an argument, that politics does kind of act in this horseshoe, and if we had kept seeing stronger and stronger movements from like the left and campuses and stuff like that across America, then it seems that there would have been a reciprocal force that would have manifested somehow from the right. But I can only assume that it wouldn't have had I can only hope they wouldn't have had the support if Trump wasn't involved in the beginning. I don't know.
No.
Maybe there's good news. Maybe the good news is actually that Trump has been so egregious that he's actually made the alt-right movement look really bad. There must be... I don't know if that's true or not, but I can understand people, if they were willing to reassess their views, change their opinion about what alt-right was.
I kind of think that the alt-right the people that we would consider to be alt-right will always be alt-right. They have these opinions, and I don't think they can't be like reasoned with or bargained with at this point, and they just seen Trump as a platform. And now Trump has disappeared, I don't think they are reevaluating their views. No. I just think they're going to maybe go back into their hidey holes and their message boards. And
it's because if I can pray to God, there's not going to be another alt-right candidate this year. Seems or whenever the next election is. So it's incredible people. And as I said, I just kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit because I feel there's not enough discussion about it. It's because it's just a given that they are the devil, and they are the devil, but. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how they got to that space in the first place. And as well, like when it comes to these things, like talking about political groups, like everything's so diverse, it's hard to group people up. We're just kind of looking at general views and kind of coming to observations. But each and every person that joined the alt-right movement, I'm sure, will have a very personal reason, and it will make sense to them. We can only judge things as they kind of move to this larger scale.
And in their sort of warped way,
right?
It'll make sense as to why they're part of that group. Mm-hmm. So and like we say, if we think they are like 1% of the population, should we be trying to do something to help that group? Should we be? But I suppose if these people are feeling disillusioned, they probably feel the reason that they are like this is because they feel forgotten. So maybe society has to do a better job of supporting people. I
think society has to do a better job of supporting these groups, but I think society also has to do a better job of telling these people to grow the fuck up. Like, pull your big boy pants on and get outside and do your fucking job and clean your room, that type of shit. I do believe that there are many people out there that do feel like completely and utterly disillusioned and disheartened, and they don't know what to do, and they end up regressing. And there will be a government's place to help with that, but at the same time, it's like, grow up, don't act like a child. Don't just see other people and start calling them stupid racist names, because you don't even know why you're saying that. Do you actually think the country would be a better place if it was all white? If you actually think that, fucking do a bit of reading and, I don't know, just enlighten your scope. It's because there's something wrong with these people that you can only feel so sorry for them, right?
Yeah, sure.
So I
think that there is something to be said for that they're just spewing these opinions and they don't have any reason or thought for it. I don't understand. There's no merit behind racism.
No, exactly. Yeah.
There's no merit behind homophobia. As we discussed in the first episode of the show, there's no merit behind that. And we need to. These people need to be educated, I think, more than anything else. But yeah, it's a tough one. I'm not sure how we can stop that at the source.
Well, I don't know whether we want to stop it. I really don't. I think this should always be there. I think it should be publicly available, and people should be willing to make fun of them for it. Because we can't suppress opinions. I don't think that's the answer here. I really don't think it is. When you start suppressing these things, they just start bubbling up in different ways and manifesting in ways they might not have anticipated. So I don't think these people need a platform. I don't think they need to be silenced, though. I think people just need to be aware of what they think and have a bit of an idea about what next time you call something alt-right. Is it actually alt-right? Is it someone that's just a bit more conservative, or is it someone that's just lashing out? Is it an idiot? There's nuance to this term that's probably worth even when we're going forward in this podcast, I'm going to be trying to be a bit more aware of that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I think it's probably a good one to be more aware of anyway. You see people disregard it a lot, and I guess the conclusion that we draw from that is that we should try and be a bit more aware of what it is.
Yeah.
And we should try and I guess like understand that it is bad, but understand why it's bad and why it's cropping up.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of an obvious one. It's just, once again, it's like, appreciate the nuance of this issue. You know, we're not trying to say they're good, and most of the time when you hear people talking about, all right, you know, it would be safe to say that there's a bunch of people being stupid, but it's interesting trying to understand where they're coming from. It's because if you don't understand how people have got to this mindset in the first place, you can't start alleviating the problems. And at the end of the day, it is a large movement. It's only 1%. We're guessing, obviously, but that's a lot of people, you know, and it's worth thinking about what gets these people in this situation, and that's part of what I wanted to draw some awareness to.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely have a bit more appreciation for it now. Not appreciation isn't the word,
right? Yeah,
awareness is probably
sure.
is the word, I think.
Yeah.